For this last set of factoring notes, we're looking at when you have 4 terms. So the first step is to group these first 2 terms and the last 2 terms and look and see what GCF do I see in these first 2. So the GCF I see here is x squared. The GCF from these last 2, you're always going to take this middle sign, so minus, and a 4 can divide into both. So negative 4. Then you're going to take and write those in front of a parenthesis, and then you're going to see what's left. So if I took out an x squared, I'd be left with an x plus 1. If I took out a negative 4, I'd be left with an x plus 1. Because if you think about it, it's dividing by that negative 4 on both of them. Dividing by that x squared on both of them. So that's how this set came into play. So if you'll look, we see that these 2 completely match. They have to be perfectly a match. You write it down once. That means factor it out. Then you're going to take what was left and write it down in the other parenthesis. Now we have the difference of squares. And so we're going to factor it. So square root of x squared gave us that x. The square root of 4 gave us that 2. And so that's how we got to the answer of x plus 2, x minus 2 times x plus 1. So let's look at a couple of examples where we're going to work through together. Looking at 35. So if I take my first 2 terms and I focus in there. So the GCF I can see in those 2 is x squared. So I'm going to write down an x squared. Then I'm going to open up a parenthesis. If I took out x squared from x cubed, it leaves me x. If I took out x squared from negative x squared, gives me negative 1. Now I'm going to come to the next one. I know that the sign I need to write down is that plus. So I know that my GCF between these 2 terms has to be a positive number. And the 9 and 9, so that gives me a 9. And so that leaves me with what's left of x. So if I take 9x divided by 9 gives me x. Negative 9 divided by 9 gives me a negative 1. Now these 2 match. So I'm going to write them down. X minus 1. Now let's take what's left. And we're going to make a parenthesis using those 2 things.
Teachers, pardon interruption. I need all junior high students that are going to the tennis tournament today in Mason to go get on the bus. Make sure you remember your racket.
So our answer is x minus 1 times the quantity of x squared plus 9. So let's take our second one. So if we look at our first 2 terms, what's in common, my GCF of those first 2 terms is k squared. So I want to write down that k squared. And I'm going to write down what's left. So k to the third divided by k squared gives me k. 5k squared divided by k squared gives me a positive 5. Now let's go to the next set. It's negative, so I know I'm going to have a minus here, and that means my GCF is going to be minus. I have no common term, so it's just going to be a negative 1. And I know you don't have to write the 1. It does help you when you're doing this process to go ahead and write it. So if I divide it by negative 1, that makes that positive k plus 5. These 2 match perfectly, so I have k plus 5, and then we write down what's left. K squared minus 1. So I have a subtraction, so I need to check and see if I do have a difference of squares. So can I take the square root of k squared? Gives me k. Can I take the square root of 1? That gives me 1. So that means I have k plus 1, k minus 1 based upon that. And then the k plus 5 just gets brought down. Now let's go on to the next one. Let's go at number 38, or 37. If I look at these first two, what is my common factor? Well, I know I have a v squared in both of them, so that's my GCF, is v squared. Now, what's left? 4v cubed divided by v squared gives me 4v. A minus 5v squared divided by v squared gives me a negative 5. Now, for my second GCF, I know it has to be negative because there's a minus sign here, so that tells me I need a negative for my GCF. What number divides into 16 and 20? And that number would be a 4, so negative 4. Now divide both of those. We have 4v plus, divided by negative 4 gives me a negative 5. These match, and if those ever don't, go back and double check your work, because on these problems you're going to end up with those matching. And we're going to create a second problem. V squared minus 4. So I have a minus, so it could be a difference of squares. So can I take the square root of v squared? Can I take the square root of 4? So I have v minus 2, or v plus 2, v minus 2. It really doesn't matter the order you put them, but don't forget to write down your original problem. Let's go to number 38. So, looking out of my first two terms, what's my common GCF out of these two? Well, a 2. And now look at my x's. I can take x to the 4th out of both of those, because there's an x in both of them, the lowest power being 4. So that's going to leave me with x to the 1st minus 9. And so now let's go to the next one. My GCF on those, I can pull out a positive 7. So I look and see, what am I left with? I'll divide both of them by 7. That gives me x minus 9. So that parenthesis matches. Now let's write down our other one. So I'm looking here and I see a positive, so that means it can't be difference of squares. Look at the power is to the 3rd, so it can't be sum or difference of cubes. So I'm done. My answer is x minus 9 times 2x to the 4th plus 7. So let's look at number 39. So out of the first two terms, now look and see what can factor out of these two guys. Well, a c to the 3rd power can. So my GCF is at c cubed. Open your parentheses, and we have c plus 9 that's left. Now let's look at our second parenthesis. It's negative, so I'm going to have a minus. And there's no number in common, so it's just going to be -1. And that's just going to change the sign, so it's going to become a positive c plus 9. I write down the common factors, c plus 9, and I write down what's left, c cubed minus 1. So I have a difference, and this time it's of cubes because of my power. So I take the cube root of c, and that gets c cubed, and that gives me c. Cube root of 1, and that gives me 1. So that tells me our first parenthesis is c minus 1, and then we're going to create the second parenthesis. So we're going to remember that SOAP. So that tells me same, opposite, always positive. Now I'm going to fill it out. So squared, so c squared. Then the product, 1c. I don't have to write that 1. It's understood to be there, so I don't have to write that. And then we have 1 squared, which is 1. In the front parenthesis, we have the c plus 9. So that is my final answer. Looking at 40, is there a common factor in all of these? And the answer is no. So let's take the first two. If I was to look for a common factor between those, I can come up with g cubed. So I'm going to write that down. And that's going to leave me with 2g minus 3. Now my second part is plus, so I know I need to have a plus. And so I'm going to go ahead and write that plus down. A 4 can divide into both parts. So I'm going to have a 4. But we really have more than that can divide into both parts. What number bigger than that can divide in? How about an 8? So now we're left with 2g minus 3. So I'm going to write down my parenthesis, 2g minus 3, and then I'm going to write down what's left, g cubed plus 8. So this first one we're done with. The second one, we have a sum, and my power is cubed, so sum of cubes. And so that tells me I need to take the cube root of g cubed, which is g. The cube root of 8 cubed, or the cube root of 8, which is 2. So my parenthesis is going to be that g and the 2, and then I'm going to use that SOAP acronym to help us create it. So same, opposite, always positive. Now I'm going to take and use my smiley face. So square, g squared. The product, 2g, square, 4. And then I write down my first parenthesis, 2g minus 3.